Hi, my name is Allison Jenkins and I am the OSGA 2019-2020 State Secretary. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the Open Records Act, and I'm going to be teaching you how to take minutes. So the Open Records Act is a series of laws that's designed to give the public access to the minutes and documents of government functions and government meetings. So this ensures some transparency in what people do when running their business. So OSGA is covered under the Open Records Act, so we're required to disclose what we're doing. And so I'm also going to teach you how to take some minutes so that way you can comply to the Open Records Act.
So now let's learn how to take minutes. Minutes can be pretty easy. It just depends on how simple or how complex you want to make them. So we're going to use a sample agenda that I just made up for ABC University. I like to use an agenda whenever I take minutes because it is already formatted. It goes in order of what you're discussing and what's being voted on. And this way you don't have to worry about formatting your own document, and it has every single item that's going to be talked about. So this makes it a lot easier to keep track of where you're at and what is next. So we're going to start with a call to order. We're going to call to order at 1:50 p.m. You can either approve the agenda or approve minutes from the previous meeting, but we're going to go ahead and go for the approval of the agenda. If something is added to the agenda last minute, you can include that in the minutes. So let's say that we added an item C to new business. We would just jot down that we added item C to new business, and then we'll put approved next to it. For the sake of consistency in our example minutes, we're going to go ahead and cross that out just because we didn't add an item to new business. Also, if you want to include attendance in the minutes, you can, but I find it a lot easier to keep track of attendance in a separate document, especially if you have a larger group of people. If you have a smaller group of people, or if it's just your executive committee, if they have a required amount of meetings that they have to attend, you can definitely jot that down in the minutes just to put their attendance and just make that a pretty short thing next to their reports. So now we'll move on to reports. Let's say that the student government president met with the university president and heard that we're going to have some budget cuts. Oof, is that too real? So just take down the highlights of what people report about, and then that way you can look back on your minutes if you forget about it or you want to reference them, or just remember what was talked about in your meetings. If an officer doesn't have a report, you can mark no report next to it, or you can put NR, short for no report. Just whichever you use, make sure you stay consistent so that way people referencing back know what you're talking about. So next we'll go on to committee reports. Let's say that Committee A decided to have green streamers at their next event. So marking this down in the minutes allows us to look back if we forget what was decided and if we need to double check. Streamers are a pretty silly example, but this is a good way to keep track of what decisions are made and to make sure that you follow decisions that specific committees make and to ensure consistency within your SGA. This is another way to keep track of the past and improve on the future. So moving on to old business, we'll say a past event went really well, but it had a few downfalls. So let's say here that the food was amazing. Everybody loved it, so we definitely want to bring that food back. We can mark that down so that way next time we know to bring that vendor back. What if the speakers weren't great? Well, if you mark that down in your minutes, you'll be able to look back on it in the future and then decide that you don't want to have those speakers from that certain organization. This way you can make sure that you're moving forward as best as possible and ensure that your organization just keeps growing and gets better and better. Let's move on to resolutions. So House Resolution 2019-001. If there are no amendments, you just go ahead and put approved or passed next to it, and then you'll mark how many votes it got. So to this we'll say we have 10 yeses, 3 noes, and 2 abstentions. Now let's say we have an amendment. Wow, I wish I could spell. Anyway, so the amendment got 1 yes, 10 no, and 4 abstentions, so we would mark it as failed, and then we would go to vote on the resolution as a whole. So we'll say that it got 15 yeses, 0 no's, and 0 abstentions, and she passed. So marking how many votes it got is really important. It's much better than putting simply passed or failed next to something, because depending on statutes and bylaws and the rules within your SGA, something might need a simple 51% majority, or some things might need a 2/3 majority. and marking it down is an easy way to keep track of how many votes they got, and it makes it a lot easier to account for that 2/3 rather than just counting on hand and not marking it down. Always, always, always make sure to mark if something is passed or if it's failed. If you vote on it, you have to mark it down. That's one of the biggest points that you need to make in taking minutes. Next, we'll move on to funds requests. Sorry that I didn't put a cute, quirky organization name, but you get the idea. This is pretty much the same as marking votes for legislation, so we'll say that this has 10 yeses, 2 nos, and 3 abstentions. Always, always, always be sure to keep track of votes around funding. It's crazy how our universities care about where their money goes to. Keeping track of that is really important to make sure that your SGA is held accountable for everything that they do. Some SGAs have announcements at the end, so make sure that you mark down the highlights of what is being announced. If somebody misses something during announcements, they can go back and they can look at your beautiful minutes to catch up on what they missed. And as always, we end with adjournment. So let's mark down that we adjourned at 1:57 because here at ABCU Student Government, we keep things short and sweet. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I will try to answer them as best as I can. Thanks for watching.